Three, two, one. What's up, everybody? Mark and Sarah back for another episode of Able Today. This is disability journalism, where we hear stories, tell stories, and more broadly, advocate for people, families, and everyone impacted by disability. Um, Sarah, we've got some recent news. President Biden gave his State of the Union address recently, and whether you liked it or not, one thing he spoke about was funding Medicaid, home and community-based services, and he followed that up by including 150 billion over 10 years to strengthen and expand Medicaid home and community-based services in his budget request for the 2025 fiscal year. What do you think?
Wow, I think it was a huge step forward. As somebody who spent way too much time in Washington, lived there for almost 15 years, and now being immersed in a state capital and kind of my day job running the Kansas Developmental Disabilities Council, this is our biggest issue. We've talked about it before on prior episodes. You've heard me talk about this with you offline. We have 5,200 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities waiting for those HCBS services. And Medicaid is a federal and state program. And many folks don't realize that you need this federal state coordination to be able to provide waiver services, whether you're a person with Down syndrome, autism, or you may need to access a physical disability waiver. So huge step forward. Now, politics is politics. We need to get the budget process across the finish line, and it needs to come full circle and land on his desk so more families and more individuals, most importantly, can be served.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, we always talk about how specific pieces of legislation will impact the disability community, especially those that benefit. And this is a huge benefit, right? This is a win across the board. And to your point, it needs to get to his desk. I think that from the community perspective, and for all of our audience, everybody who watches this, we need you to communicate with your legislatures that this is important, right? And this is something that we need to push, something that needs to happen. Every voice matters, right? We hear this so frequently, but reaching out to your congressmen and your senators and saying, this is something that we support. This is something that's going to help my family, and we want to see this happen.
We need more voices. Pick up that
more
phone. Voices. When disability organizations ask you to pick up the phone, send an email, tweet, 9 times out of 10, it's gonna move the needle. And at the end of the day, folks need to hear from their constituents. That's, Mark, you heard the story a million times. It's how we got ABLE passed. People had trusted relationships with their folks back home, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Speaking of moving the needle, we are interviewing someone today who has definitely done that. And as always, really excited to have this conversation with her.
All right, introduce her. Let's bring her on.
Well, Sarah, we are honored to have our guest today, New Mexico State Treasurer Laura Montoya. And just to do a brief intro, before being elected as state treasurer, Laura worked in government for more than 20 years and has had a great track record in all of her roles, including serving 2 terms as the Sandoval County Treasurer. Plus, she was the legislative chairwoman for the past 7 years for the Treasurer's affiliate, and worked diligently to pass more than 20 pieces of legislation and assisted our veterans, seniors, and disabled. And there's more. Laura is a trailblazer. She's not only New Mexico's first Treasury Secretary, but she's also the first Latina state treasurer in our nation's history. Wow. Welcome, Laura.
Sí se puede. Hi. Happy to be here.
Glass ceiling broke. We are so honored to have you here with us this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you all.
So Treasurer, before we get into what you're doing now, can you tell us briefly about what you did for veterans, seniors, and the disability community when you served as the legislative chairwoman?
Sure. So I had the honor of being the Sandoval County Treasurer. Sandoval County is the fastest growing county in the state of New Mexico. I moved there several years ago after working in this office as the administrative assistant for State Treasurer Douglas Minchbaum 20-some years ago. So anyone who is thinking, wherever they're at in their journey, know that you can then come back and be the boss. Living in Sandoval County, I decided to really get involved in my community. and was finally told I needed to run for office. So I did. And I served 2 terms, 8 years as the Sandoval County Treasurer. I had already worked at the legislature for several years. And so I had already built relationships, understood the process. I worked in the House and the Senate. I'm one of the few people in the state of New Mexico that has worked on both floors. And I listened with the intent to understand people's perspective and how they grew up or what they've been dealing with. And so I utilized those relationships and the things I learned to help us get some legislation done while I was the county treasurer. And so one of them that I'm really proud of is for our senior citizens, 65 years of age and older. If they are disabled or 65 years of age or older, they would have a threshold that their property would be frozen on the valuation so that their income's not moving up. So you shouldn't be moving their property taxes up. And so long as it stays in their name and they don't, win the lottery or get some type of money in, they can stay consistently at that value. And what we found is a lot of times with the consumer price index or inflation, there'd be an increase in their social security disability or social security or their pension, and it would knock them off just because they were $3 over. And so we thought strategically as a treasurer's affiliate that we're not going to be here all of the rest of other people's lives, and how can we make this be better? So we added in a CPI so that every year property tax division under tax and rev will reevaluate, and then that number threshold will go up so that you're not negatively impacting any of our elderly or disabled.
That's incredible. And speaking from someone who does a lot of public work and is constantly told to run for office, and also from Sarah's perspective, who ran for office, thank you for your service. I said no, and I say no every time. Like, I understand the weight of that responsibility, but we need more people like you. That's incredible.
Thank you.
I mean, Mark, maybe the treasurer help me gang up on you here, encourage you to run. One of these days.
I'm running away from it.
It's important that whatever is in your heart and you want to create change, it's harder to have other people be dependent on whatever you're wanting. And it's easier when you put yourself in the front and get done what needs to get done. So I was a campaign manager for several years. I started my first campaign when I was 18 years old. But there was a time when somebody got a DWI, and all that hard work I did to get him elected, and it was gone that quickly. And after that, I realized that I needed to stop putting it in other people's hands and start working towards putting it in my own hands, because there's no one that's going to be harder on me than me. And so trying to get things done and accomplished, you need to be able to be at the table. And I can't be at that table unless I'm either someone's staffer or I'm the elected official. And being the elected official puts a lot of weight on your shoulders. But if you have a really good team around you, you can make really good choices for your state. And so I would say, Mark, if God talks to you later, you can't say no. You just got to get it done. But you will live in a fishbowl.
And yes, that as somebody I ran in 2020, as somebody who went through it, yes, you do live in a fishbowl. And Laura, I think there's many reasons why I raised my hand in 2020, but one of them was actually my experience working and helping lead the advocacy effort behind the ABLE Act. Was I really saw firsthand when I was working on Capitol Hill and helping lead the conversation for the National Down Syndrome Society, that both parties can actually work together. And I love your background, because you had lived experience actually doing a lot of the work, getting people elected, and as working in the legislature as staff, developing policy that at the end of the day is going to work for the end user. And I think that kind of leads me, Mark, I went off a little bit off script, but it kind of leads me to my question about your experience already working with ABLE accounts, even before you took on the task of and running and winning as the state treasurer of New Mexico. So tell us a little bit about what you all are doing in New Mexico to expand the ABLE program, and kind of where are you in terms of accounts and what that program looks like today, because I'm sure it's grown tremendously under your leadership.
It really has, and I'm very excited. So I started off by hiring somebody to be my programs and outreach director. Her name is Jerry Modest. She worked in the Attorney General's office before. So she has a lot of experience on both the legislative side. Her late father is a former legislator of the New Mexico House of Representatives. And so I needed that experience because we wanted to expand the ABLE program to align with the federal legislation. And so she also has a financial literacy background. And for me, that's really important. Bridging the gap of inequity comes in all different pictures. One of them is on the financial literacy side, so that young people can have a leg up in understanding the financial side of things. On the other end, we have people who are very vulnerable in our community, including our disability community. And so Jerry was the perfect person to put in that role to really look at it. So when we came in, there was over 1,900 emails that had not been opened regarding ABLE. And so I just had a lot of concern. One of the people that had worked in the treasurer's office before had left. And so I rehired her on contract services because she really is the person who started off the program and got a lot of people to trust her and align with her. Her daughter also has a disability. And so she's very well engraved and respected in the disability community. And so I think that was the start of being able to see where we were at and where we need to go. So since then, we rebranded the stable to State Treasurers Achieving a Better Life Experience. We have the most beautiful logo.
Whoa, that is probably one of the best logos, Treasurer, I've ever seen. That's
Thank you. So the Zia symbol has a lot of meaning to people in New Mexico. It's from the Zia Pueblo. We asked them for their blessing to be able to utilize it for this program. And so we're using New Mexico stable, but just in the last couple of months, we are now at 1,759 accounts open since the inception of ABLE to now 1,398 active accounts at 19% increase since taking office, and a total of 13.9 million assets under management, which is 5.1 million growth, which is a 58% increase since taking office. So the average account holder has about $10,000. We're just shy of that $10,000, which is a 33% growth since taking office. We rebranded it. We're putting together a new website. We're doing a lot more outreach. We're working with banks. We're working with community partners. We're working with people within the disability community. We've put out information during the legislative session. And Jerry helped write the legislation. We got the bill passed. Representative Thompson was our sponsor, Senator Rodriguez on the Senate side, and they got that bill passed. The governor signed it, and now we are in alignment with federal legislation. So the age is now from 26 to 46. That will go into effect in 2026. And that will, in essence, help at least 6 to 8 million veterans along the way with all other people with disabilities. So cheers to my team for making that happen. Woo-hoo. And yeah, so we got a lot of things going on over here.
We need to bring her on the speaking tour with us, Sarah.
Yes, wind her up. Like, let's go. We're talking about that at the national level too. Treasurers, just how do we as a national disability community start to proactively look and target those organizations, veterans groups being obviously a high priority, to start educating them about ABLE now. We don't need to wait until January of 2026. So kudos to you in getting that legislative effort enacted, recently, because that in itself is free marketing. I'm sure those veterans groups were, tremendously happy to be part of that conversation at the state level.
Well, I have to tell you something on the veteran side. So previous job, one of my first professional real jobs was working for U.S. Senator Jeff Bingaman. After I was actually working on my master's degree at the time. And New Mexico, specifically northern New Mexico, per capita had more veterans than anywhere else in the United States. And so I had the distinct honor of meeting a lot of veterans from different wars who had never received their military benefits or who had never received their awards. And so I was able to work under the senator's office to be able to get that money to them and get them their medals. And so for me, it's really near and dear to be able to help veterans as well. So we had someone who's a state rep that was a former Secretary of Veterans Affairs in New Mexico. And he was like, "What are you doing talking about veterans?" And I was like, "First of all, I helped you get your first bill passed when you were a secretary to help veterans. Near and dear to my heart, let me explain the program to you." And so I did. And then he aligned it. Now he's talking to all his groups that he still has contact with on the veteran side. On the other end of the legislation that I failed to mention that's huge is that they eliminated the Medicaid clawback. And so I think New Mexico is sometimes a little behind on some things, but on other things, we are very forward thinking as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as it relates to fairness and equality for all people, and for helping our most vulnerable. New Mexico is known for being number one in that, at least in my book. So I'm very happy that my team was able to get that bill passed in our legislative body, and our governor was very supportive of it.
Treasurer, that's incredible. And kudos to, again, you and your team. You are miles ahead of a lot of places, actually. And, a part of the work that we do with Able Today is trying to help push people forward. So it's great to have partners like you that are where we are. I'll add too, you're already doing a lot of really great recruiting. Another huge focus for Able Today, and I think the Able community nationally, is how do we scale Able, right? And you touched on this with your outreach efforts, with taking the branding seriously, the partnership seriously. But what more can we do?
I think having more discussions and simplifying it as to what this does for folks is important. I was in New York last week or 2 weeks ago, and in Washington, D.C. last week, talking about other items as well as stable. And every single person has somebody they know, they care about, or that is in their life that has a disability.
Yes.
Or potentially a veteran that is in their lives. And so it's having us have more conversations. One of the things that was discussed in the panel is that the treasurer's office is statistically known for being the most trusted elected office within all of the statewide offices. And so I think respecting that and utilizing it in a way that's going to help our community to thrive is important. And so I think having those conversations through the state treasurer's office and having those programs in the state treasurer's office brings a little bit more ease, especially to someone who feels very scared to give the only money that they get and put it in an investment account and have the risk that they think that they might not get that money back, or not understanding, that realm of investing or money management. It's important to have somebody that they know that they can trust is going to take care of their money. And so I think that's part of the equation.
Well, eliminating the Medicaid clawback, right, is huge.
It's huge, Mark. And the other thing I love about just this information that you're sharing with our audience is the fact that you've acknowledged that, ABLE, as it passed in 2014 at the federal level, and the original statute in New Mexico when you enacted your initial state law, it's continuous improvement. The initial legislation that we passed in 2014 wasn't perfect. I mean, case in point, Mark, we talk about it a lot, the Medicaid clawback. It wasn't something we wanted. We didn't want to put, a age restriction, but as Congress was in 2014, it's very different than the dynamics we have now for certain. But that's amazing that you all are just thinking about different ways of improving ABLE, at a state level and getting ahead of the curve. We certainly need more of that kind of visionary leadership that you're asserting.
Thank you. Having a 20% increase in the amount of accounts that we're impacting, or the people that we're impacting, is really significant to do in less than a year. And it's a 2-woman show. So I'm very impressed with my team, and I know that near and dear to their heart, this is something that matters a lot. So they stayed long hours at the legislature just making sure that this bill got passed. And I think the more people we get involved in our team to help spread the word, the better off that New Mexicans with disabilities are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're talking about it at the national level. I mean, I just came back from the National Association of State Treasurers, and we talk about ABLE at the national level, and there's a competition, or at least I make it a competition. Like, well, how many accounts did you guys get? Well, what's your percentage that you guys got? You're going to have to beat me next year because I already won. So it makes it more fun to like try to get there. Or, Marilyn is doing such an amazing job. And so I love to go talk to that lady and say, hey, how are you guys doing? And she tells me the new legislation they got to work with their schools. To get it in 26, I think, different languages, to get the word out to folks. So it's just being creative and trying to figure out how we can all either not reinvent the wheel, but if we have something new, sharing it with each other.
Yeah, we love some healthy competition in the able community and disability community. Speaking of competition, Treasure, we also love to hear real world stories about able and how people with disabilities are utilizing the program. Are there any specific examples in New Mexico that stand out that you might share with our audience?
Sure. Something that I thought would be important to share on this podcast, especially because it's national, is we had a mother from Colorado come over to New Mexico. She opened up an account in Colorado when she lived there, and it had a moderate investment account option. And then she transferred to New Mexico, and she was so thankful that when she transferred the investments that we do, she boosted up her account to $100,000, and they were able to spend it down to renovate their bathroom so that now where they moved, it's accessible for ADA compliance. And so I thought, wow, that's really nice. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever done a remodel, but now especially it's so expensive. So for her to not have to stress about the idea of how they're going to have day-to-day operations with a wheelchair, it's important to be able to have that comfort in the stability to know that your child is going to be okay, or you're going to be okay, is important. Happy we could be a part of that.
Love that. Love that. Final question for you, Treasurer. And this is the money question. We ask this to all of our guests. What's the best thing about able accounts?
So I would say for me, it's creating wealth for people who have challenges to do that. When I ran for office, it was all about bridging the gap of inequity. And so being able to do that for a vulnerable population and giving them the same type of sustainability that any other individual or family would have. I mean, that's the American way of doing things. And knowing that you're not forgotten because of some of the circumstances, or you're less than because of some of your circumstances, is really important for our disability community to know and understand. A lot of our veterans who ended up getting a disability later in life, who served our country, they need to know that they can come back and that we're going to take care of them, that we're going to have ways of opportunity to help them to thrive and still feel whole in a situation where they might not always feel that way.
Love it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Sara?
As always, Mark, our guests just keep getting better and better. But Treasure, don't share that with the Maryland crew, because it sounds like Maryland and New Mexico are competing. They may get a little.
Might be a little tug of war there, Sara.
I'm gonna send them Mark's way, not my way.
Competing, but really with a lot of love. Their love for people really energizes me. When she first came up to me and spoke to me at the first NAS conference I went to, I was just like, this lady's so passionate. I was like, Jerry, you need to call this lady. Maybe she'll feed off some of that energy to you of what she's been doing. And Jerry is very competitive. So once she knew there was, what people were doing, she's like, all right, we could do this. Let's do this. And so she just kept going up and up and up. And now look where we're at. And we're only a year in. So I'm very grateful and thankful for being able to be a part of the change in this office to help more people and to bridge that gap.
Well, Treasure, on behalf of the disability community and everybody, thank you for your energy and your passion. Thank you for your leadership and the vision to make this better. It takes people like you to really make a positive change on the world, and that's what we try to do.
Thank
But
you. Can I share
really,
a quick story with you?
yes, please.
Absolutely.
I don't know what made me think about it, but now it just came to heart. So one of my best friends from high school, his name is Toby Montoya. We're not related. It's just we're in New Mexico. So Toby decided to go to war, and I was angry. I was really upset with him actually when he did it. But he came back, and he had gotten hit by an IED, and he was still walking. But about almost a couple months later, he started getting some pain in the sciatica and something going on in the back area. And so he couldn't walk anymore and was in a wheelchair. And so when I was working at the legislature, there was a bill to increase the dollar threshold for people who park in handicapped parkings. And I supported that strongly because when we went to the store, he couldn't get out because somebody parked so close and he couldn't spread out enough to get the wheelchair out. And it really, really angered me. And so we were able to change that legislation as a staffer. I was very supportive of that. Moving on, I'm in the kitchen and he's visiting. He'd moved near me in Rio Rancho, and I was yelling at him like, "Listen to me, are you talking to me?" And I turned around and the wheelchair had flipped backwards and he had hit his head again, and he had already had traumatic brain injury. So I was really scared. I thought his mom was going to kill me. I mean, I thought we were back like in high school again because I was like, oh, I'm going to be in so much trouble. And he was okay. But from that day to today, he's able to be a lot more successful. And now he's using these type of walking gear so he can walk and just be able to have the life that he anticipated having even after going to WAR. And so for those who might not think like this is that important, think about the people in your life that made some sacrifices or commitments and be able to understand that they deserve to have some sustainability, and they also deserve to have some type of validity in the world that is equal to what your freedom is.
Mic drop. Love
Absolutely. What a story.
We should really just do Able Today stories. Like,
maybe that's where we need to start. We need to kick these off. We'll talk to the team. That's an incredible story, and what a personal connection. Makes it even more worthwhile what you're leading for everyone in New Mexico.
To your point, Treasurer, it makes the work worth it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It makes it easier. So thank you for sharing that personal story. Yeah. I'm glad we were able to extract that. That's
I know. I don't know what's going on over here, but I'm happy to share it. And Toby inspires me all the time, and so I'll share the podcast with him so he knows I do think about him, even when I haven't been calling him and being good about it. So that's my way of saying sorry for being a not so great friend, but great treasure.
or help us recruit to get Toby on our podcast. It seems like
I would love to. He's a wounded warrior. Speaks at the national level, so maybe I can do that.
We would love that.
Great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Treasurer, for joining us today on Able Today. And to our audience, stay tuned for the next episode. Cheers.
Make it a great day. Bye-bye.